He was born into poverty. He dropped out of high school. By his mid-20s, he was broke, deeply in debt, and trapped in a life he despised. His self-confidence was shattered, his future looked grim, and on most mornings he couldn't imagine a single reason to believe things would ever be different. Then someone handed him a book. That book was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And the man holding it was a 26-year-old named Bob Proctor, a young man who had never read anything cover to cover in his life, who had failed at almost everything he'd attempted, and who had absolutely no reason to believe that his story was about to change forever. But it did. Within 1 year of reading that book and obsessing over its principles, Bob Proctor went from earning $4,000 a year to earning over $100,000. Within a few years, he had crossed the $1 million mark. He didn't get a new job. He didn't win the lottery. He didn't inherit money. He didn't stumble into a lucky break. He changed the way he thought. That was his only move. And it turned out to be the most powerful move a human being can make. Bob Proctor would spend the next 6 decades of his life studying the mind, how it works, why most people stay stuck in limitation, and what separates those who build extraordinary wealth from those who struggle their entire lives. He shared his findings with millions of people across the globe, becoming one of the most respected teachers of human potential who ever lived. Today, we're going to walk through the very ideas that shaped his philosophy, the core principles behind how to think like a rich person, exactly as Bob Proctor taught them. What does it actually mean to think like a rich person? Most people assume it means thinking about money all day, obsessing over stocks, studying investment strategies, calculating returns. But Bob Proctor would have told you that this completely misses the point. According to Proctor, wealth is not primarily a financial condition. It is a mental condition. The rich don't have money because they got lucky or because the world handed them advantages the rest of US didn't receive. The rich have money because they think differently. And because they think differently, they act differently. And because they act differently, they produce different results, consistently, predictably, and often remarkably quickly. This idea didn't originate with Bob Proctor. He was the first to admit it. He was a student, a devoted, lifelong student, of teachers like Napoleon Hill, Andrew Carnegie, Wallace Wattles, and Thomas Troward. What Proctor did was take their wisdom, live it himself, and then spend decades translating it into language that ordinary people could understand and immediately apply. He used to say something that stopped people cold the first time they heard it: you don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. Think about what that means. It means your bank account is not a reflection of the economy, or your employer, or your circumstances. It is a reflection of your inner world, your beliefs, your self-image, your paradigms, and the thoughts you repeat to yourself day after day after day. That is either a deeply unsettling idea or a profoundly liberating one. Bob Proctor always believed it was the latter. Because if your thoughts created the life you're living now, then different thoughts can create an entirely different life. The power was never out there in the world. It was always inside you. In this video, we're going to walk through 7 essential chapters of Bob Proctor's philosophy on how to think like a rich person. Each chapter addresses a different dimension of the wealthy mindset, from how rich people see themselves, to how they relate to money, to how they respond to fear, failure, and the opinions of others. If you've been waiting for something to shift, if you've been looking for the turning point, let this be it. Let's begin. Bob Proctor was relentless on one point above all others: everything is created twice. First in the mind, and then in the physical world. Before any fortune is built in reality, it must first exist as a clear, vivid, burning idea in the imagination of the person who will build it. Most people wait for circumstances to improve before they allow themselves to feel wealthy. They say, "Once I have more money, I'll think differently." But Proctor taught the exact opposite. You must think differently first, and the money will follow. Proctor often explained that the mind operates on 2 levels, the conscious and the subconscious. The conscious mind is where you set goals and make decisions. The subconscious mind is where your real programming lives, the deep beliefs and patterns that drive your automatic behavior every single day. Here is the problem for most people. Their subconscious is loaded with beliefs about money that they absorbed in childhood and never questioned. Beliefs like, money is hard to come by, rich people are greedy, or, we're just not that kind of family. These beliefs run silently in the background, sabotaging every conscious effort to build wealth. Rich thinkers, by contrast, have conditioned their subconscious mind to be comfortable with wealth. They expect to prosper. They feel deserving of abundance. And so they move through the world in a completely different way, seeing opportunities that others miss, attracting relationships and situations that align with their inner expectation. Proctor taught a simple but powerful distinction. The difference between a poor mindset and a rich mindset is not intelligence, education, or talent. It is belief. One person believes wealth is possible for them. The other, deep down, does not. And the results reflect that difference with startling accuracy. One of his most famous teachings was about the terror barrier, the invisible wall of fear and doubt that stops most people just as they begin to move toward a bigger life. When you try to think bigger, your conditioning fights back. The terror barrier is the moment most people quit and return to their old patterns. Rich thinkers learn to push through the terror barrier. They feel the fear, acknowledge the doubt, and keep moving anyway. They understand that the discomfort of growth is temporary, but the cost of staying small is permanent. Proctor would often say, if you can hold it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. This wasn't motivational filler. He believed it as a scientific fact, that the mind, properly directed, has the power to draw into your life whatever it is focused upon with clarity and emotion. The first step to thinking like a rich person is accepting this completely. Your financial reality is an inside job. Change the thinking, and you change the results. Everything, every strategy, every tool, every opportunity, flows from that foundational shift in the mind. Bob Proctor noticed something peculiar about the way most people talk about money. They do it with guilt, shame, fear, or resentment. They argue about it, worry about it, and feel vaguely uncomfortable whenever the subject comes up. This emotional charge, Proctor taught, is a signal that their relationship with money is broken. Rich thinkers, on the other hand, see money as a tool, a neutral instrument of exchange that flows toward value. They don't worship money, but they don't fear it either. They are simply comfortable with it in a way that most people are not. Proctor traced this difference back to what he called money paradigms, the mental programs formed by repeated exposure to ideas, beliefs, and examples during childhood. If you grew up in a home where money was scarce and stressful, your paradigm around money is likely one of scarcity and stress. And that paradigm shapes every financial decision you make as an adult. He taught that you cannot out-earn a scarcity paradigm. You might get a raise, win a prize, or receive an inheritance, and still end up right back where you started within a year or two. This is why lottery winners so often return to their original financial state. The external numbers changed, the internal programming didn't. To truly shift your relationship with money, Proctor insisted you must begin by studying it. Not just how to manage it, but its nature, what it is, how it circulates, why it multiplies in certain hands and evaporates in others. Knowledge dissolves fear, and fear is what keeps most people financially stuck. Rich thinkers understand that money flows in response to value. The more genuine value you create for other people, through your service, your product, your ideas, your art, the more money is naturally drawn to you. Poverty thinking asks, how do I get more? Wealthy thinking asks, how do I give more? Proctor also spoke about the energy of money. He believed that money, like everything in the universe, is a form of energy, and like all energy, it responds to the vibration of the person handling it. When you operate from fear and desperation, money retreats. When you operate from confidence and generosity, it flows. Challenged his students to look honestly at their current financial results and recognize them as a perfect mirror of their current money paradigm. This wasn't an exercise in self-blame, it was an exercise in self-awareness. You cannot change what you will not face. One of his most practical teachings was to decide on an exact income figure. Not a vague wish, but a specific number, and then write it down and read it every single day. This practice begins the process of making the subconscious mind comfortable with that number. Rich people are not lucky with money. They are aligned with it. They think about it clearly, feel good about it consistently, and treat it with the same respect they would give any powerful resource. That alignment is learnable. It starts with deciding to see money differently, starting today. If you were to distill the single greatest difference between the thinking of the wealthy and the thinking of the struggling, Bob Proctor would have pointed you here. One group sees the world as infinitely abundant, and the other sees it as desperately scarce. Scarcity thinking says there is only so much to go around. If someone else succeeds, there is less success left for me. If someone else has more, I somehow have less. It breeds jealousy, resentment, and a tight-fisted approach to life that repels the very thing it desires. Abundance thinking operates from a completely different premise. There is more than enough for everyone. Another person's success is proof of what is possible. not a threat to your own. Another person's wealth expands the evidence of what the universe is willing to provide. Proctor often pointed to nature as the model of abundance. Look at the ocean. Look at the night sky. Look at the way a single apple tree drops thousands of apples, each containing seeds for thousands more trees. Nature is not stingy. Scarcity is a human invention, a mental construct, not a physical reality. He taught that abundance thinking must be practiced consciously until it becomes automatic. This means interrupting yourself every time you catch a scarcity thought, every time you feel jealousy, resentment, or fear about money, and deliberately replacing it with an abundance-based perspective. Rich thinkers celebrate the success of others because they understand something the scarcity-minded do not. The wealth of others expands the collective evidence that wealth is available. Every millionaire you celebrate makes your own million more believable to your subconscious mind. Proctor also taught that abundance thinking extends far beyond money. It encompasses time, opportunity, love, creativity, and possibility. A person who thinks abundantly in all areas of life develops an inner atmosphere that attracts richness in every form. One of his most striking observations was that poor people focus on saving, while rich people focus on earning. This is not a criticism of saving, it is an observation about where energy is directed. The scarcity thinker guards what little they have. The abundance thinker expands what they're generating. He frequently encouraged his students to begin giving, even when it felt uncomfortable, even when resources felt tight. The act of giving is a declaration to your subconscious that you live in an abundant world. It resets your inner programming in a way that no amount of intellectual convincing can. To think like a rich person is to wake up each morning oriented toward possibility rather than limitation. It is to see a world brimming with opportunity, creativity, and supply, a world where your success doesn't come at anyone else's expense, and where there is always, always more than enough. Bob Proctor had a specific definition of a goal that most people find surprising the first time they hear it. He said a goal should scare you. It should be something you genuinely don't know how to achieve right now. If you can see the entire path from start to finish, it's not a goal, it's a plan. A real goal requires you to become someone you've never been. Most people set goals that are slightly better than their current reality. They want a little more money, a little more time, a little more comfort. And while there is nothing wrong with incremental improvement, Proctor believed these safe goals don't activate the full power of the human mind. He taught that the mind becomes most creative, most resourceful, and most powerful when it is confronted with a goal large enough to demand expansion. Small goals produce small activation. Big goals wake the mind up. Proctor was known for encouraging his students to write a dollar amount on a card, an amount that felt almost laughable, almost impossible, and carry it everywhere. The goal was not to plan for it, but to simply hold it in the mind long enough for the subconscious to begin treating it as normal. He distinguished between two types of goals: those set from what is already known to be possible, and those set from what is deeply desired regardless of current knowledge. The second type, he believed, was the only kind worth pursuing. The first keeps you trapped in your current paradigm. Rich thinkers are comfortable with not knowing the how. This is perhaps the most liberating aspect of their mindset. They decide what they want with absolute clarity, commit to it emotionally, and then trust that the way will reveal itself as they move forward. The how is not their job at the beginning. This doesn't mean they are passive. It means they act on every impulse, every idea, and every nudge that moves them toward the goal, even when they can't see the full picture. Each step forward reveals the next. The path is built by walking. Proctor often said that most people major in minor things. They expend enormous mental and emotional energy on problems, worries, and circumstances that are entirely beneath their potential. Rich thinkers direct that same energy upward, toward vision, toward growth, toward the next level. He also emphasized that goals must be written down. A thought in the mind is ephemeral. A goal on paper is a commitment. The act of writing activates something in the human nervous system that simply thinking about a goal does not. The pen is a declaration of intent. If you want to think like a rich person, decide right now on a goal that excites you and frightens you in equal measure. Write it down. Commit to it. Don't wait until you know how. Rich thinkers begin before they are ready, and figure the rest out along the way. Of all the concepts Bob Proctor taught, none was more central to his philosophy than self-image. He believed, with the conviction of someone who had lived it, that a person will never outperform their self-image. You will always act in a manner consistent with the person you believe yourself to be. Self-image is not vanity. It is not how you look in the mirror. It is the inner picture you carry of who you are, your capabilities, your worth, your place in the world. And most people formed that picture decades ago, based on the words of teachers, parents, and peers who often had no idea what they were saying. Proctor pointed out that you can give a person with a weak self-image all the money in the world, and they will find a way to lose it. Conversely, a person with a strong, wealthy self-image who loses everything will find a way to rebuild it. The self-image is the thermostat. The results are just the temperature. Rich thinkers have cultivated a self-image that is consistent with wealth. They see themselves as deserving of success. They feel at home in the company of successful people. They don't shrink in the presence of big numbers or big opportunities because internally, those things feel appropriate for them. This self-image doesn't develop by accident. It is built deliberately, through repetition, through the intentional feeding of the mind with ideas, images, and affirmations that reinforce the wealthy identity. This is what Proctor meant when he talked about impressing the subconscious. You feed it what you want to become, over and over, until it believes you. He taught that most people do the opposite. They let the outside world impress the subconscious. They watch news that reinforces scarcity. They surround themselves with people who confirm their limitations. They replay past failures instead of future victories. And the self-image hardens into something small. Proctor was a lifelong advocate of affirmations, not as wishful thinking, but as a tool of mental reprogramming. When repeated with emotion and consistency, affirmations gradually shift the beliefs embedded in the subconscious. They are not lying to yourself, they are rehearsing the truth of what you are becoming. He also stressed the importance of environment. Your self-image is constantly being shaped by who you spend time with, what you read, what you listen to, and what you watch. Rich thinkers curate these inputs with the same care a professional athlete applies to their physical training point. One of his most repeated challenges to his students was this: write down your self-image. Describe yourself on paper as you honestly see yourself. Then write down the person you would need to be to achieve your goal. The gap between those two descriptions is your work. Close that gap, not by changing your circumstances, but by expanding your self-image, and your circumstances will change in ways you cannot yet imagine. This is the inside-out transformation that Bob Proctor spent his life teaching, and it begins with seeing yourself differently. One of the great myths about successful people is that they are fearless. Bob Proctor flatly rejected this idea. He was not fearless. He experienced fear regularly throughout his life. The difference, he taught, is what you do with the fear, whether you obey it or override it. Fear, in Proctor's framework, is almost always a signal that you are approaching the edge of your current paradigm. It is the nervous system's alarm system, warning you that you are about to do something your programming has never done before. It is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that you are on the right path. Introduce the concept of the terror barrier, that invisible threshold of fear and resistance that appears whenever a person tries to move into unfamiliar territory. It is the moment of maximum discomfort, and it is precisely the moment when most people retreat back to the familiar. Rich thinkers have trained themselves to recognize the terror barrier for what it is. Not a wall, but a doorway. Every major breakthrough in Proctor's own life came through pushing past a moment that felt impossible. And every time he did, he found that the fear dissolved quickly once the threshold was crossed. He taught that there are only two kinds of people when it comes to fear: those who let it stop them, and those who feel it and act anyway. The second group is not braver by nature. They are simply more committed to their vision than they are attached to their comfort. Proctor was fond of pointing out that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. The rich thinker has a goal that is so vivid, so compelling, so emotionally charged that it becomes bigger than the fear. The goal pulls them forward. The fear becomes background noise. He also taught that inaction is not safe. Most people assume that by not acting, they are avoiding risk. But Proctor believed that the greatest risk of all is the slow suffocation of your potential. Staying in a life that is too small for you because you were never willing to walk through the terror barrier point. One of his practical tools for dealing with fear was to act immediately on any impulse toward a goal, before the mind has time to manufacture reasons not to. The window of inspired action is short. Rich thinkers learn to move fast when the impulse comes, before the conditioned mind slams the window shut. He often told the story of his own early years, how terrified he was the first time he stood in front of a room and spoke, the first time he quoted a big price for his work, the first time he made a bold financial decision. Each act of courage expanded his identity. Each breakthrough made the next one more possible. Fear is not your enemy. It is simply a measure of how much growth is waiting on the other side of the action you've been avoiding. Think like a rich person. Feel the fear, name it, and step forward anyway. The life you want is always on the other side of the thing you're most afraid to do. Bob Proctor read Think and Grow Rich every single day for over 50 years. Not because he hadn't understood it yet, but because he understood that growth is not a destination. It is a direction. And the moment you stop growing, you begin to decline. This is perhaps the most underappreciated aspect of the wealthy mindset. Rich thinkers are obsessed with learning. Not necessarily formal education. Proctor himself dropped out of high school, but the relentless, self-directed pursuit of wisdom. They read, they study, they attend, they ask questions, and they remain students until their last breath. Proctor believed that the mind is like a muscle. Use it and it grows stronger, more expansive, more capable of holding and executing bigger ideas. Neglect it and it atrophies. It defaults to old patterns, old limitations, old excuses. The wealthy mind is always under active development. He taught that your income cannot exceed your personal development. This is a law as reliable as gravity. You will be paid in direct proportion to the value you bring to the marketplace. And the value you bring is a function of who you are, what you know, and how you think. Invest in yourself first, and everything else follows. Rich thinkers also understand the concept of mentors. Proctor credits his entire transformation to a mentor named Ray Stanford, who handed him Think and Grow Rich and refused to let him quit. Every major leap in Proctor's life came through relationship with someone who was further along the path. He never stopped seeking such relationships, was also a firm believer in the power of seminars, courses, and live events, not because they magically change your life, but because they create an environment of concentrated growth. When you surround yourself with people who are thinking bigger, your own thinking expands through proximity. Proctor taught that every new idea you entertain is a seed. Most people reject new ideas quickly. They feel uncomfortable, unfamiliar, or threatening to the existing worldview. But rich thinkers hold new ideas long enough to evaluate them honestly. They ask, what if this is true? What could become possible if I adopted this belief? He warned against the trap of comfort. Comfort, he said, is the enemy of growth. The moment you feel too comfortable, too settled, too safe, too sure of yourself, it is a signal to raise the bar. Rich thinkers are perpetually slightly uncomfortable, perpetually slightly ahead of where their current skills can take them, and they wouldn't have it any other way. He also taught that gratitude is one of the most powerful growth accelerants available to any human being. When you are genuinely grateful for what you have, you are in a frequency that attracts more. Gratitude is not passive contentment. It is an active, expansive energy that opens the mind to new possibilities. Bob Proctor lived to 87 years old and was studying, teaching, and growing right up until the end. He didn't retire from becoming. If you want to think like a rich person, commit to this above all else. Never stop growing. Make learning your lifestyle, expansion your identity, and growth your most non-negotiable daily practice. Bob Proctor used to say that the only difference between where you are and where you want to be is what you think and do in between. It sounds simple. It is simple. But simple is not the same as easy, and this is where most people miss it. They hear the philosophy, they feel the inspiration, and then they walk back into the same day with the same thoughts and the same habits and wonder why nothing changes. The teachings in this video are not ideas to be admired. They are instructions to be lived. Write down your goal, the one that excites and frightens you in equal measure. Study your paradigms, the invisible programs running your financial life without your awareness. Begin to feed your subconscious something new, something bigger, something truer to what you are actually capable of. Act in spite of fear. Give in spite of lack. Learn in spite of busyness. Grow in spite of comfort. These are not romantic suggestions. They are the precise mechanics of how people like Bob Proctor, a high school dropout, a broke young man with no advantages, transformed their lives from the inside out and never looked back. The world doesn't need you to stay where you are. It needs you to become what you are capable of. Bob Proctor spent 60 years showing anyone willing to listen that wealth is not a privilege of the few. It is a possibility for anyone brave enough to change the way they think. That means you. Right now. Starting with the very next thought you choose to hold in your mind. Think differently. Live differently. Become the person who has already decided that a rich, full, extraordinary life is not just possible, it is inevitable.